Marilyn Manson is now facing additional accusations, ongoing investigation into domestic violence, a warrant in New Hampshire, and 3 civil lawsuits. As we go into the TLDR of the recent past and added updates, I would like to announce a trigger warning. Throughout this video, we will discuss topics of sexual abuse, rape, psychological manipulation, gaslighting, PTSD, trauma, and other possibly distressing subjects. On February 1st of this year, Evan Rachel Woods came out and formally named her abuser as Marilyn Manson. Miss Woods originally told her story of abuse, sexual assault, and resulting trauma at the congressional hearings for the bill for sexual assault survivors starting in February 2018 and through 2019 without naming Manson. She spoke as part of an effort to get the Sexual Assault Survivor Bill of Rights Act of 2016 implemented in all 50 states. The bill amended the Federal Criminal Code to establish statutory rights for sexual assault survivors, including the right to receive a forensic medical examination at no cost, have a sexual assault evidence collection kit, i.e. rape kit, preserved for the maximum applicable statute of limitations, receive written notification before destruction or disposal of a rape kit, and to be informed of the rights and policies under each section. The bill was signed into federal law on October 7, 2016, by President Barack Obama. Currently, many states have passed similar laws reinforcing the act statewide and protecting these rights. Regrettably, not all states have completed the process. A link for further information of the act is posted in the video description area. I have also linked an article with Evan Rachel Wood's full testimony. Her testimony was poignant, insightful, and reflective. In my opinion, a must-read when considering the perspective of victims of assault who wait long periods before reporting, or those who may never report their abuse. It is at moments absolutely heartbreaking and indeed traumatic. Her story is harrowing and includes incidents of sexual assault while unconscious, bondage against her will with physical and verbal abuse, threats against her life, gaslighting, and brainwashing, resulting in her self-esteem and spirit being completely broken. Her statement ends with the following words I find hard to forget, and I quote, "What makes me more hurt and more angry than the actual rape and abuse itself was that piece of me that was stolen, which altered the course of my life." Woods first named Manson as her abuser on Instagram, which reads as follows: "The name of my abuser is Brian Warner, also known to the world as Marilyn Manson. He started grooming me when I was a teenager and horrifically abused me for years. I was brainwashed and manipulated into submission. I am done living in fear of retaliation, slander, or blackmail. I am here to expose this dangerous man and call out the many industries that have enabled him before he ruins any more lives. I stand with the many victims who will no longer be silent." Upon release of the post, social media was flooded with support for Evans. Allegations of abuse from others began appearing across all platforms. Similar stories, with consistent notes of manipulation and torturous abuse, were retold, all expressing the fear of coming forward and the need to address the trauma and PTSD resulting from the events. Many indicate the same type of experiences, including rape, physical abuse, gaslighting, and brainwashing. The accusers are all from the industry: actresses, models, musicians, fashion advisors, photographers, and videographers. Many had initially entered into a consensual relationship with Manson. Like Miss Woods, things started out well until they were not. Manson had money, power, and influence over their futures. Each had a plan for their future before becoming involved with Manson, and reporting the abuse could have thwarted their efforts for success in the industry. In the following Instagram stories, posted by Chloe Black and Ashley Lindsay Morgan, you can hear the fear in their words. They are now coming forward as more accusers feel brave enough to tell their stories. These are just two of the stories from social media. There are many more, including articles in Variety, People, E! News, Huffington Post, New York Times, and other publications, which give more detail on each accuser and their story. This is the post from Chloe Black, and I quote, "I knew this day would come. I've been waiting for it for 10 years. The women who spoke out yesterday are so incredibly brave, and I support them with every inch of my heart. Everything they said is true. It happened to me, and I witnessed happening to some of them with my own eyes. He even bragged to me about the violent and abusive things he did to some of these women. I need you to know that it's all true and then some. 10 years is a long time to carry such an awful secret. Why did I keep silent all this time? How could I not speak out earlier after what he did to me and what I saw him do to other women? No matter how many times you rationally try to explain to yourself that it's not your fault and it did happen, the internal shame runs so deep that even now, 10 years on, I am deeply embarrassed to admit the truth. In addition to the many psychological reasons for not speaking out, there are also some practical obstacles that we face when it comes to outing an abuser. If I name my abuser, he might sue me. I don't have the money to fight him. I don't have any physical evidence. He has money, influence, power, lawyers on retainer, and a frighteningly devoted cult of followers who are going to be out for blood right now. I have nothing to gain from telling my story. In fact, I'm risking a lot by potentially incurring the wrath of his supporters. I risk being labeled as a victim of for the rest of my life, or being labeled as difficult by people in my industry. There's nothing to be gained. I won't get positive attention or clout, as people say. I won't get money. My family and friends are going to be upset to learn all this. I never let anyone know the truth of how bad it was. When people asked me about dating him, I always saw an excitement in their faces. They wanted to hear good stories. I lied to them. I told them the funny things they wanted to hear, that he was smart, that he was funny. I probably defended him. I lied to them, and most of all, I lied to myself. Trigger warning. I, too, was love-bombed and manipulated. I was much younger and very inexperienced. He tried to dictate my appearance. Clothes, hair color, makeup. He called me fat and ugly if it wasn't what he wanted. He didn't let me sleep or eat or leave his house. I was so cold all the time. He bragged to me about the unbelievably abusive things he did to others, even admitting to wanting to kill them. He said many, many racist and anti-Semitic things and laughed at my outrage. He belittled me for listening to black people music. When he flew into a rage, he had a growling, animalistic scream and threw glasses at walls. He was almost constantly high and drunk, but he screamed at me over and over that it wasn't the drugs talking, and he meant every word he was saying. I believe it. I don't think there's a drug in the world that can turn a kind person into the kind of psychopath he is, but a cocktail or cocaine, alcohol and Valium, certainly doesn't have that power. I had never even tried cocaine or Valium back then, and didn't try them with him. I was sober apart from some light, moderate drinking on some evenings when people came to the house. Not that it ever matters at all or is anyone's business. It just happens to be the truth in my case. I've only been bruised to the point of my skin turning black once in my life. It was from him. I think he wanted to punish me for having previously tried to stand up to him. When I went to the studio that day, the sound engineer's shocked face said it all. My whole chest was black. I went straight to work from his house, and I hadn't yet seen the damage. The engineer seemed angry at me, that I allowed the abuse to happen, and I remember how awful that made me feel. I hid my chest for the next 10 days and buried the memory. For the record, BDSM is not something that I was into or ever consented to. This was abuse. One night, I thought he was actually going to kill me. He confided something so dark, violent, and incriminating that I thought there was no way he was going to let me leave that house alive. Of course you can say, but he's famous, and you must have known that he wasn't actually going to kill you. And I kept thinking that too. I kept glancing at the door, wanting to run, and wondering if I could make it there before him, and then trying to reassure myself that I didn't need to run because famous people can't murder girls and get away with it. I kept thinking, surely this isn't happening. I tried to hold back my tears so that he wouldn't see my fear. I told myself the only way I was going to get out alive is if I could manage to act like everything was fine. I didn't manage to hold in the tears, and after I started sobbing, it took him about 8 hours of lecturing and comforting and manipulating me until I eventually was so exhausted I stopped questioning what I'd seen and heard and just went to sleep. I accepted the lies and manipulation, and I did what I had to do to keep him from turning on me. It's called fawning, and is a common response to trauma, a survival tactic. For a long time after we broke up, a big part of me still desperately wanted his approval. No one consents to this kind of psychological torture. He told me he loved me, and then behaved like a monster. He made me cry. He told me I looked pretty when I cry, and then took photos of me crying. Chloe. These are the words of Ashley, and I quote, I was contacted by Marilyn Manson, Brian Warner, while modeling overseas in Bangkok, Thailand, in 2009 to 2010. I genuinely didn't really know who he was, but I had heard of his musician name in high school. We had a mutual photographer friend, and he said Brian wanted me for an upcoming project. I was certainly worried at first. When we met, we talked about literature and film. He seemed intelligent, authentic, and caring. After a very long time of talking and texting, he flew me out to Los Angeles to be part of a film and photo series. He said he believed in me as an actress, and I had confided in him that I wanted to get out of modeling. It seemed like a perfect opportunity. At first, it was. He was like many of the musicians I'd met, but with cocaine and abstinence. He made me feel safe. He told me he'd protect me, and I believed him. I went from the Roosevelt Hotel to living with him very quickly, and things turned dark very quickly as well. I was given rules and got in trouble for any behavior he didn't approve of. There was abuse, sexual violence, physical violence, and coercion. I still feel the effects every day. I have night terrors, PTSD, anxiety, and mostly crippling OCD. I try to wash constantly to get him out or off of me. While I was flying back and forth from Thailand, he asked me to bring him Nazi memorabilia. There is so much in Asia that was hidden during World War II. He wanted everything I could find. I brought him swastika throwing stars, knives, rings. It felt so wrong because I am Jewish. He said he only dates Jewish girls, and it was a joke between us. I brought him all this horrible stuff and feel so much guilt and shame because of it. I wanted to believe it never happened, and he wasn't hurting people the way he hurt me, shamed me, publicly embarrassed me. He could throw me out of the house in next to no clothing at all if I fell asleep at 3 a.m. I wasn't allowed to eat or sleep or leave. I was awoken with loud music if I fell asleep. He made me feel like him cutting me, burning me, his fist in my mouth was our thing. There is so much more that happened. I don't want him to do this to anyone else, and I felt responsible for others getting hurt for so long. I just thought it was somehow my fault. I know he is still doing this to a rotating door of young girls and causing irreparable damage. I am coming forward, so he will finally stop. Marilyn Manson responded with his own Instagram post as follows. Obviously, my art and my life have long been magnets of controversy, but these recent claims about me are horrible distortions of reality. My intimate relations have always been entirely consensual with like-minded partners, regardless of how and why others are now choosing to misrepresent the past. That is the truth." End quote. The Los Angeles County Sheriff still has an open investigation into domestic violence charges from 2011. No criminal charges have been filed against Marilyn Manson in regards to these accusations at this time. This brings us to the recent updates. On April 30th of this year, Esme Bianco, a British actress known for her role on Game of Thrones, filed a civil complaint against Brian Warner, a.k.a. Marilyn Manson, his manager, Tony Chiola, and Chiola Management, Inc. The complaint includes charges of sexual assault, sexual battery, and violation of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, an act that protects the application for visa process. Bianco is an advocate for survivors and sponsors the Phoenix Act. It lengthens the statute of limitations for domestic abuse felonies to 5 years and expands training for officers working on domestic violence cases in California. It is noted that Evan Rachel Woods also sponsors this legislation. Ms. Bianco has said that even as she worked to amend the legal system on behalf of survivors, and I quote, "I am also pursuing my right to demand my abuser to be held to account, using every avenue available to me. For far too long, my abuser has been left unchecked, enabled by money, fame, and an industry that turned a blind eye." Her hope, she added, is that by coming forward, I will help to stop Brian Warner from shattering any more lives and empower other victims to seek their own small measure of justice. A breakdown of the specific complaint filed is as follows, taken directly from the court-filed documents. Relevant to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, paragraph 27 and 32 of complaint reads as follows. Mr. Warner employed fraud to bring Ms. Bianco to the United States. He promised work opportunities that never appeared while inserting himself in her visa process. Ms. Bianco reasonably relied upon Mr. Warner's promises of work due to his connections in the industry. Mr. Warner used both fraudulent offers of movie and music video roles to convince Ms. Bianco to travel to Los Angeles, whereupon Mr. Warner then made threats of force and performed violent sexual acts on Ms. Bianco, to which she did not consent. Because Mr. Warner had previously cast Ms. Bianco in what she believed to be a legitimate music video, her reliance on future projects was reliable. In fact, Mr. Warner went so far as to direct Ms. Bianco to draft paperwork to confirm that she would star in his upcoming film, for which rehearsals would begin shortly after her arrival in the United States. Mr. Warner knew these offers to be fraudulent, as he had previously recruited Ms. Bianco to come to the United States to film a music video he never intended to publish. Upon information and belief, after Ms. Bianco's arrival, no effort was made to create the Phantasmagoria film. By inserting himself in Ms. Bianco's visa process, Mr. Warner was able to control Ms. Bianco by threatening to withdraw support if she displeased him. Mr. Warner's culpability is further demonstrated by preventing Ms. Bianco from escaping the situation by confining her to his bedroom, threatening her if she attempted to leave the apartment without permission, restricting her communications, and interfering with her visa process. In addition to the sexual acts demanded by Mr. Warner through force and/or threats of force, plaintiff was also required to provide unpaid labor for Mr. Warner during the April 2011 to July 2011 period. This included serving and preparing food for Mr. Warner and his guests, cleaning his apartment, consulting on his album, providing uncredited backup vocals during the creative process for the album Born Villain, and being offered up to his guests and bandmates to spank. Mr. Warner implied that because he had brought Ms. Bianco to the United States and provided housing, she owed him labor and sexual intimacy. Plaintiff feared for her safety and that of her friends and family if she did not comply. Mr. Chiola and Chiola Management jointly and severally represented Mr. Warner throughout this period. Mr. Chiola and Chiola Management knew of Mr. Warner's conduct and benefited financially from allowing this abuse to continue. Ms. Bianco interacted daily with Mr. Warner's bandmates, producer, and assistants. These parties witnessed Mr. Warner's abuse directly and received photos from Mr. Warner of the damage he caused to Miss Bianco. Mr. Warner's former assistants discussed Mr. Warner's abuse directly with Mr. Chiola. Miss Bianco herself would contact Mr. Chiola when Mr. Warner's temper tantrums ensued. Mr. Warner's assistant also coordinated Miss Bianco's travel and lodging each time she visited Mr. Warner with full knowledge of Mr. Chiola and Chiola management, and acted as Miss Bianco's babysitter when Mr. Warner was not present. Mr. Warner's management had a vested interest in supporting his violent tendencies to encourage the creation of his art and the promotion of the brand of Marilyn Manson, and were complicit in Mr. Warner's abuse of Miss Bianco. It was only after these abuse allegations were made public in February of 2021 that Mr. Chiola and Chiola management withdrew their representation of Mr. Warner after more than 25 years. Relevant to the sexual assault and sexual battery sections, paragraph 33 and 35 of the complaint, contains the following. Mr. Warner used drugs, force, and threats of force to coerce sexual acts from Miss Bianco on multiple occasions. Mr. Warner raped Miss Bianco in or around May of 2011. Miss Bianco was well aware of the violence Mr. Warner could dole out if she fought back, having been on the receiving end of his temper many times. He also supplied drugs to Miss Bianco, deprived her of sleep and food in order to weaken her physically and mentally and decrease her ability to refuse him. Mr. Warner committed sexual acts with Miss Bianco when she was unconscious or otherwise unable to consent. Mr. Warner also committed sexual battery against Miss Bianco on multiple occasions throughout her time in Los Angeles in 2011. These acts included spanking, biting, cutting, and whipping Miss Bianco's buttocks, breasts, and genitals for Mr. Warner's sexual gratification, all without the consent of the plaintiff. Esme Bianco has done numerous press outings since the filing and continues to encourage alleged victims to come forward and be heard. May 29th of 2021, another complaint for sexual abuse is filed. The woman, identified as Jane Doe, sued the musician Manson in Los Angeles Superior Court for sexual assault, sexual battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The woman claims to have been exploited and victimized during and after their relationship in 2011. Ms. Doe claims meeting Manson at a pre-Grammy party in February of 2011. After the event, she states he began contacting her by text, phone calls, and emails. He requested her presence at his property a short time later. Doe claims the rocker informed her that his assistant, Ashley Walters, would be present to act as a chaperone. She claims in the complaint Manson aggressively pursued her despite Walters being present. Marilyn showered her with compliments and bizarrely spray-painted a phrase in his bedroom regarding the plaintiff's nationality. Jane Doe claims Manson said he loved her within 2 weeks of meeting and gave her keys to his apartment. He demanded she move in with the musician and was increasingly controlling, as stated in the filing. Quoted from the complaint, defendant lured plaintiff, a musician, into what was at first a consensual romantic relationship. A short time later, however, he raped Miss Doe. He also subjected Miss Doe to further degrading acts of sexual exploitation, manipulation, and psychological abuse. A member of Manson's team strongly denies the accusations when questioned by Fox News. The plaintiff said it wasn't until learning of another sexual assault lawsuit filed against Manson that the memories she repressed for years put her on notice of her potential causes of action related to the rape. To the extent that any of the plaintiff's causes of action otherwise may have expired by the time this action was filed, the statute of limitations period for her causes of action were told and are therefore timely, the suit states. It is my opinion the statute of limitations will be an ongoing concern as more accusers come forward. A pattern of behavior and intimidation may assist in the filing of criminal charges still being investigated. However, it appears that for most, the option of a civil case is the most prudent. In reading the complaints and having read the many retelling of experiences by the other accusers, the legal issue surrounding the actual lack of consent appears to be a quagmire. It is true, clearly, in my opinion, consent can be withdrawn at any time, and being in a consensual relationship is not considered to be consent for any given act. Many of the accusers were in continuous relationship with Manson and remained in contact with him for numerous years. I am intrigued by how this issue gets addressed in the event these cases go to trial. And then there were three. Marilyn Manson's former assistant, Ashley Walters, filed suit in the Superior Court of the State of California for the County of Los Angeles on May 18, 2021, naming the goth rocker, his company, Marilyn Manson Records, and listing does 1 through 10 inclusive. Details in the complaint indicate the witnessing of many of the allegations by third parties, who could be named as included during discovery. The complaint lists 6 areas of civil cause: sex discrimination in violation of California Civil Code 51, 51.5, and 52. Sexual harassment in violation of California Civil Code 51.9 and 52. Sexual assault in violation of California Civil Code 340.16. Interference with the exercise of civil rights in violation of the Bain Act, California Civil Code 52.1. Sexual battery in violation of California Civil Code 1708.5. And intentional infliction of emotional distress. The plaintiff, Ms. Walters, is requesting a jury trial. Similar to the Jane Doe lawsuit, Walters' attorney states it was not until hearing of another accuser's allegations that she was able to begin processing what actually happened to her. Discovery rule of complaint lists as follows. Walters did not discover the circumstances sufficient to put her on notice of her potential causes of action until the fall of 2020. During this time, a group of individuals who had been victimized by the defendant reached out to plaintiff to ask about her own experience while working for him. The support group included several of defendant's ex-girlfriends, such as Wood, Bianco, and Ashley Morgan Smithline. It was during these meetings that the plaintiff realized the extent of her experiences and that what she suffered during her employment was not only traumatic, but unlawful. In an Instagram post in February, Ashley Walters told her story in her own words as follows, and I quote, Brian Warner, a.k.a. Marilyn Manson, reached out to me on social media in 2010, asking if we could collaborate on a photo shoot together. As a photographer and an admirer of his work, I was excited for the opportunity. We quickly became friends, and after about 6 months, he asked me to come work for him full-time as his personal assistant. In the beginning, he'd put me on a pedestal and would tell me I was saving his life. He'd frequently say things like, "It's us against the world." We became extremely close, like family. We even got matching tattoos. He presented his house as a safe space where you could express yourself freely and without judgment. I didn't realize he was gathering information that he'd later use against me. I soon became a victim of his psychological abuse. He was very skilled at gaslighting his inner circle. I'd witnessed him inflict his psychological abuse on everyone he employed, everyone he dated. He would dictate the perimeters of our reality. Horrifying, deranged behavior and insane scenarios became normalized. He was extremely interested in mind control, torture tactics, different sound frequencies that would shift your mood or make you nauseous, and spy devices to gather information for blackmailing and manipulation. It felt like I was his property because he would offer me up for sexual encounters to please potential collaborators or friends and brag that he could do so. I'd be threatened if he wasn't happy with me or be made to do impossible tasks so he could continue to berate me. He isolated me from my friends and family. Sometimes I wouldn't be allowed to leave for days. Sometimes I wouldn't be allowed to sleep. He'd frequently become violent, throwing items including glass plates and heavy objects. Many nights, I feared for my safety or the safety of others. I'd let management know when I was having an exceptionally bad experience with him, but they'd say things like, "It is what it is," or "He's done worse," and send me back in. Sometimes I was too scared to tell management everything. Sometimes I was told it was my fault because I wasn't setting enough boundaries. A year or so later, our professional relationship ended. He continued to harass me and smear my reputation for months. He threatened my financial security. By then, I'd grown close with several of Manson's bandmates, girlfriends, and friends. I witnessed them at their own stage of having their world be controlled by him and his abusive antics. Whether it be through charm or coercion, it wasn't at all unusual for any of us to get sucked back in. It took me a long time to fully realize and process the trauma I went through and witnessed. My very first panic attack occurred while working there. I continued to suffer from PTSD and struggle with depression. I stayed in touch with quite a few people who went through their own traumas under his control. As we all struggled, as survivors do, to get on with our lives, I'd keep hearing stories disturbingly similar to our own experiences. It became clear the abuse he's caused, he continues to inflict on so many, and I cannot stand by and let this happen to others. Brian Warner needs to be held accountable. Ashley Waters. The similarity in the stories of all the accusers is evident, in my humble opinion. The abuse allegations made about Marilyn Manson are being investigated by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department as confirmed by a Hollywood reporter. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Special Victims Bureau is investigating allegations of domestic violence involving Mr. Brian Warner, also known as Marilyn Manson, who works in the music industry, a department spokesperson said in a statement. The incidents occurred between 2009 and 2011 when Mr. Warner lived in the city of West Hollywood. With the new lawsuit filings of Bianco, Walters, and Jane Doe, it is indicated in several articles that the LA County Sheriff's Office is considering interviewing the claimants in order to determine the criminality and jurisdiction. This investigation is still open. Following the allegations, Manson was dropped from his record label, Loma Vista Recordings, who told The Hollywood Reporter that it would no longer promote Manson's recent album or work with him on future projects. Manson also faced fallout in his acting career. A segment of the Shudder series Creepshow that was set to star Manson in the upcoming season did not air. Meanwhile, Stars, American Gods, in which Manson had a short recurring role, did not air a remaining episode until Manson's character was edited out. He was also dropped by his agency CAA after 25 years. Recently in New Hampshire, a new warrant for arrest was issued for Manson on 2 counts of simple assault regarding an incident involving a videographer at a concert in August 2019. The original warrant for his arrest was issued in October 2019, but despite repeat notifications, Manson, whose real name is Brian Warner, had not returned to New Hampshire to answer the charges. Guilford Police Department Chief Anthony Burpee told the New York Times. The police declined to share details of the alleged incident with the newspaper. Howard King, a lawyer for Manson, told the New York Times that a venue videographer had asked for more than $35,000 after a small amount of spit came into contact with their arm. After we asked for evidence of any alleged damages, we never received a reply. He described the claim as ludicrous and said, "We remain committed to cooperating with authorities as we have done throughout." Burpee told the New York Times that the department was publicizing the warrant simply because we've been attempting to clear the warrant since it was issued, with no response from Manson or his representatives. In light of other recent allegations, said Burpee, apparently referencing recent claims of sexual and domestic abuse made against Manson, law enforcement wanted the musician to take care of his business in the state so that he and we can move forward. It appears that social media is affecting Manson in his professional as well as legal aspects of his life. When I first delved into this matter, I read everything I could find in the media. and also books and articles put out by Manson himself, I discovered a man deeply entrenched in his performance persona. It appeared to me the lines were blurring in what was character and what was a man. For reference, I have linked the previous video with myself, Karma Valley, and Cheshire Vic covering the topic. To date, there are 15 accusers, not including Jane Doe, who have come forward with their names and allegations against Manson. Each version is horrific on its own. As a group, an unsettling pattern of behavior becomes clear, and in my opinion depicts a very disturbing pattern of violence against women. I have linked several articles for reference in the description area below, where you can find each of the named alleged victims and details of the information they are releasing. As we continue to see additional information come forward, I will be updating on new items of interest and the legal cases as they progress. Thank you for watching this video. If you haven't already and appreciate the content, please subscribe to the channel for notifications and updates. Contact information is listed on the About section of this channel. Until next time, bear out.